Hi there, everybody. I'm Jen Baker, and I am the behaviorist in Benicia Unified School District. And this is our monthly quick tips session. And we have one person here live, and otherwise, you're watching this on our YouTube channel. So, welcome. So, today we'll be talking about natural and logical consequences. So, I always start with this quote: working, parenting, and teaching are three different jobs that cannot be done at the same time. It's not hard because you're doing it wrong. It's hard because it's too much. Do the best you can. And when you have to pick, because at some point you will, choose connection. So this is just for all the parents out there. Whoever would have thought this would have gone on this long? But I realize that people are wearing a lot of hats, and yeah, we appreciate you, and hopefully that something I say today will be helpful. So just some quick acknowledgments. As usual, I pull from different places on the web. These quick tips are a great time for me to figure out like a lot of the really good resources that are out there. So today's information from the University of Minnesota Extension. There were a couple of educators and researchers there who had great material. Someone named Marcia Hall on GoNannies.com had some really great information. And then I've included some references I've used before about positive discipline. And if you want to learn more about positive discipline, we have a whole quick tips session just on that. So check it out on the playlist. The expectations, we only have one person here live today, but for our person that's here live, it's kind of hard for me to see the chat when I'm presenting, but if you have any questions, feel free to just jump in and interrupt me at any time. Otherwise, the one thing that I like to go over with everyone is the be responsible. Anything that I pull from does have an evidence base, meaning that it's not just somebody's theory. It's been tested, not just in a lab, but tested by teachers or parents, and there is evidence of its effectiveness. However, even the best interventions and strategies in the world, not all things fit for all people or all families or all kids. So if it doesn't resonate with you, hopefully you'll check out one of the other videos and find something that's a better fit. All right, so today our agenda, we'll be talking about positive discipline, just a quick review, and then it's going to lead into natural versus logical consequences and what those are, how to use logical consequences, and then I have a ton of examples, time permitting, that we'll go through. So just a real quick review on positive discipline. This is a great quote by Dan Siegel. He's done a lot of research, wrote a book called The Whole Brain Child, but he says too often we forget that discipline really means to teach, not to punish. A disciple is a student, not just a recipient of behavioral consequences. So that leads us into positive discipline. So what is positive discipline? It means, as we said, discipline means to teach. It means we show respect. We give choices, we reward good behavior, we listen, and we always remind our kids that we love them, even when we have to do the tough love thing and we're teaching them right from wrong. The whole idea behind using positive discipline instead of punishment is simply that it's just more effective in the long term. Just punishing or reacting to problem behaviors isn't the whole thing that we need to do. And so it doesn't mean that there are no negative consequences ever or no punishments ever. That's absolutely not what we mean by positive discipline, because corrections and setting limits, those are critical parts of the process. It's just not everything. So there's a lot of previous sessions that I've done on setting limits and effectively correcting behavior. So if you want more information on that, please check out those videos. Today, we're going to talk about the approach of using natural and logical consequences. So just real quick before we move on, the whole idea behind positive discipline is that we're teaching. And we understand that when problem behavior occurs, it's because the kid or the teenager is communicating something. They may be acting out for an emotional reason because they feel disconnected or something, or they may not be able to get a particular need met. Okay, maybe they're trying to escape or avoid something or get negative attention or something like that. So with positive discipline, we always approach it in a teaching way. So the same way that we would be if we were teaching our child how to do math problems or something. And we really focus on teaching them to be responsible and to think about other people's perspectives. And the whole point of this is not just to get them to behave when we're right there watching them, but to really teach them to be accountable and personally responsible and being able to be caring and empathetic to those around them. So that's positive discipline. So natural and logical consequences is one way to use positive discipline. So when we're talking about consequences in applied behavioral analysis, or ABA, when we talk about consequences, we mean anything that happens after a behavior. So a lot of times we hear the word consequence and we think just something negative, like a punishment. But in behavioral terms, when I, as a behaviorist, use the word consequences, I mean whatever happened after the behavior. What did people do or say? What happened as a result of the behavior? What did the child or the teenager get or avoid? Did we change the activities? Did we correct the behavior? And the reason this is important is because some consequences can be helpful to teach kids right from wrong, but very often too, we might have consequences that accidentally reinforce behaviors that we don't want. So it's important for us to pay attention to what happens after the behavior. And one way to ensure that we don't accidentally reinforce the wrong behavior is to use natural and logical consequences. So when we talk about natural consequences, there is a distinction here. A natural consequence is the inevitable result of a child's own actions. It's not something that's imposed upon them by an adult. So for example, let's say dad is telling Tommy that he needs to put on his coat because it's cold outside, and that if he doesn't put it on, he's going to get cold. And let's say Tommy chooses not to put on his coat. Tommy is going to be cold. So the result is a consequence of a choice that Tommy made. So in this example, the natural consequence is his responsibility. Okay. He decided not to wear his coat, so he's going to be cold. It's not anything that dad did. Dad didn't make it cold. Dad didn't send him out without a coat. Tommy chose to do it. So that would be an example of a natural consequence, something that follows that's not imposed or created by an adult. When we talk about a logical consequence, this also happens as a result of a child's action or behavior choice, but it's something that's created and imposed by the parent. So for example, let's say we have 5-year-old Sandy. She's been taught that she needs to stay on the driveway and not go into the street when she's riding her bike. They've made this clear, they've reviewed it, she's been reminded, and she chooses to go out in the street with her bike. So the logical consequence is to remove the bike for a period of time, depending on her age, the rest of the day. Well, I think I said she was 5, so probably the rest of the day would be long enough. So that's something that's imposed upon her by her mother. So the idea with logical consequences is they're arranged by an adult, but they need to have some kind of a logical connection so that the kid makes the connection between their behavior and the result. Logical consequences are most useful when there's like an unsafe behavior, if that makes sense. But overall, whether it be natural consequences or logical consequences, letting children experience the consequences of their own actions is how we teach responsibility over time. It's not about preventing all problems. It's about letting them experience the consequences and the results. And that's how we get more accountability and responsibility over time. So why does this work? Again, the bigger picture of the positive discipline approach is we're focusing on teaching. We're not shaming or just punishing the child. Really, all that does, there's so many negative side effects with that. And really, a lot of times it just teaches the kid to behave when adults are watching, and then they continue to do their own thing when they're not, instead of learning how to do things for the right reason. Natural and logical consequences result from the choices children make. So in effect, they are choosing the consequence they experience. And this is related. We have a quick tip session that's all on about how to use choices effectively. So if you're curious about learning more about that, I encourage you to check that out. But over time, by allowing children to experience the pleasant or unpleasant results of their behavior, we're helping them learn what happens because of the choices they made, rather than just blaming other people. The other bonus is this kind of approach, when you get good at it, it helps avoid those power struggles, because it's not like we're fighting or trying to get a kid to do something. We're laying out the two choices as of, if you make this choice, this happens. If you make this choice, this happens. Think about what you want to do. Okay. It really puts the ball in their court. So it can be a very effective discipline tool. But do keep in mind that this is appropriate for kids that are developmentally 3 years or older. So probably most of the people watching this have older kids, since you heard about this, school age kids, but this isn't appropriate for toddlers. The kids have to be able to understand more than just what's happening immediately in the moment. So using these, first step is how to figure out, should I use a natural consequence or a logical consequence? And there goes my ear pod. Hold on. There we go. So the first thing that we do is you have to decide whose problem it is. This will help you decide whether to do a natural or a logical consequence. So if it's the child's problem alone and it only affects them, a natural consequence can be the most appropriate way to go. And you don't really have to do anything else other than let it play out. So for example, if Sam's playing in the yard and it begins to rain and he doesn't come in, he's going to get wet. So the natural consequence would be uncomfortable at being wet, and as long as it's not dangerous, we just let it happen. We would never use a natural consequence and say, well, if they ride their bike in the street, they're probably going to get hit by a car. Obviously, we would never do that. So if it's at all a safety concern, logical consequence is the way to go. But if it's the kid's issue alone, let them just experience what happens. Now, if it affects others or it's a safety issue, that's when we use a logical consequence. So for example, let's say Sam won't pick up his toys, okay? His mother also has the problem because she really needs him to put the things away before they go. And let's say they live in an apartment complex and there's a common area, and if he doesn't put them away, they might get stolen, and it's also a mess in the common area. So it's not just about him. So she's been working to help Sam be more responsible for his toys. So in this case, a logical consequence might be more appropriate. The second thing you do is you offer choices. So when you want your child to do something, a way to coach them is to provide choices with consequences. For those of you that have seen our setting limits video, provide choices with consequences is one way to set a limit. So you explain the rationale for the expected behavior, what we think they should do and how it will play out, and the unexpected behavior and how that's going to turn out. So just explain it to them briefly and logically. Always ensure that the choices are reasonable and proportionate, acceptable to you, and safe. Okay. And then you give them time to choose. So an example here would be from the previous example, we're talking about Sam, who, let's say they can't afford to buy new toys, or they're messing up the common area. So it's not just his problem. So we decide we really need him to do it, or there's going to be some kind of a consequence we're going to arrange. We would say something like, Sam, I need you to pick up the toys right now. If you don't, they will have to be put away until tomorrow. I know you want to play with the truck when we come home, and that's not going to be possible unless you put them away in the house right now. Think about what you want to do. Okay. The next thing we have to do, and this is maybe one of the hardest parts, is we have to allow a little bit of wait time, which is hard because we want it to happen like yesterday. Otherwise, we wouldn't be asking them to do something in the first place. And the second thing is we have to follow through. So we give them a few moments to make their decision. We give a little physical space if needed. If they're upset, they might need a little more time to kind of calm down and process. Once a child chooses a consequence, we have to follow through and ignore any a behaviorist, we call it behavioral noise. All of the complaining and the moaning and the whining and the shouting or whatever it is, the tantrum that happens when we start following through on some of these negative consequences. Don't just expect that our kids are going to be like happy about it. So in this case, Sam looks at mom. He decides to keep playing. Mom says, all right, I can see you've decided not to play with your truck this afternoon. And notice she said, I see that you've decided not to play with it this afternoon. She removes the truck, puts it out of reach. Sam has a fit. Mom stays calm, which isn't easy, and simply reminds him that he made the choice and we can try again tomorrow. So to remember this the next time I ask you to clean up. Okay. So it's critical that if they choose a consequence, that we don't save them, that we absolutely have to follow through, even if the tantrum or the complaining ensues. And it's really important, especially at the beginning. We can't let kids and teenagers have the misbehavior have us back off or have them get what they want, because that just teaches them throw a fit and I'll change my mind. So hang steady. It's not easy, but following through is critical. So now we're going to talk about just some features and how to use logical consequences effectively. So again, natural consequences are what just happened. I don't wear my coat, so I get cold. Logical consequences are things that we as a parent or a caregiver need to arrange. So there's some considerations to help you do it more effectively. So the 5 features that we're going to talk about are acknowledging mutual rights, relating it to the misbehavior, making sure it's judgmental, firm but kind, and allowing room for choice. Okay. So with logical consequences, we acknowledge mutual rights. So there's what I do on each one of these slides is we have the kind of like the right way or the recommended way and the wrong way or the not recommended way. So an example here of mutual respect and rights is, Susie, I realize you and Katie are enjoying your video game, but your dad and I are trying to talk. Please turn down the volume or go outside. You decide what you'd rather do. It's calm, it's concise, it's acknowledging that they're really having fun and we know they're having fun, but we're trying to talk. So you can either keep it quieter or go outside and play later. Think about what you want to do, okay? As opposed to punishment or exertion of personal authority, which is, Susie, turn it off this instant. I'm trying to talk to your father, okay? We're frustrated, we're emotional, our voice is loud, and we're simply giving a command to do something, which usually results in pushback and resistance. So the first thing is acknowledging mutual rights. The second thing is make sure your logical consequence, it needs to fit the behavior in a logical way so that the child associates the consequence with the behavior choice. So an example. This is an example of a consequence that relates to a misbehavior. John, I'm going to mow the lawn this morning, but I won't be able to mow until all your toys are picked up. Please pick them up. If you don't, I'll put them in a bag and put them in the garage until next Friday. Think about what you want to do. Okay. Punishment unrelated to misbehavior. Okay. John, I've told you a dozen times, pick up your toys outside. They're all over the lawn. I'm just going to mow right over them, and then you can just not have any toys and forget it. We're not going to the park. Okay. We're not going to take away all the toys. We're not going to mow over them with the lawnmower, even if we feel like it. We're not going to break them. We're not going to then start removing all these other privileges. In the first example, we simply say, pick them up, or I'll pick them up and hang on to them for a few days. Think about it. The next feature is to make sure that they're non-judgmental. And again, this is all the bigger umbrella of positive discipline and approaching this in a teaching way. So non-judgmental. Dad, remember when I borrowed your AirPods without asking? Dad says, yes, I do remember. The son says, well, I lost them. I've looked everywhere and I can't find them. And the dad says, well, how are you going to replace them? Okay. So he doesn't get mad. He doesn't yell. He doesn't berate him, but he's not letting him off the hook because it's totally unacceptable that not only did he take them without asking, he lost them. So he's going to need to figure out how to replace them. Okay. As opposed to judgmental or blaming, which is you took them again. We've talked about this 100 times. I told you need to ask. That's basically stealing and you lost it. I'm never lending you anything again. Okay. Not teaching, not helpful. So the second one is more of a punishment approach. It implies wrongdoing and personal deficiencies rather than a mistake or inappropriate behavior. So by being non-judgmental, we separate the kid we love from the behavior that we don't love, if that makes sense. Related to that is making sure that we're firm but kind. And again, think teaching approach. Pretend you're teaching algebra instead of dealing with behavior. So mom says, let's say the boys are like kicking each other under the table and making a whatever, they're being loud at breakfast. So she calmly says, you can either settle down now and eat your breakfast or leave the table until you're ready to join us. Okay, calm, succinct. There's a choice there, either settle down or leave and come back when you're ready. As opposed to punishing or threatening, which would be knock it off or you're going to go to school without eating. Okay, not helpful, not supportive, not kind. Okay, but sometimes there's a really thin line between logical consequences and punishment. So the tone of voice, our attitude, our willingness to wait and let them choose and then accept their decision, even if we don't agree with it, those are all characteristics of logical consequences. But remembering that no matter how logical an action may seem to us, if our words or our demeanor is threatening or emotional, the message conveyed to the kid, regardless of our words, will be one of punishment. And when we come at things in a way of punishing, the kid is more likely to be resentful and angry at us and blame us instead of learning to take responsibility and learning from the consequence. When we get our emotions in there, it makes our kids less teachable. Okay, they just blame us and react to us instead of being willing to listen and learn from it. So the final thing, which we've talked a lot of, is allowing choice. So those choices are a critical way to set a limit, okay? And it helps in that teaching approach. And again, the opportunity for kids to choose and learn responsibility. So an example, Sarah, if you plan to spend time online with your friends tonight, you need to make sure your homework's done, okay? As opposed to demanding obedience, which is get going on your homework immediately. Okay, there's no reason, it's just, and then Sarah's mad because mom's telling her she has to do her homework. Instead of saying, hey, I know you want to do this fun thing later, make sure you get it done so you can do that. Okay. So here are some examples of logical consequences. So the kids are going out to play, but one of them made a mess in the living room. So one possible logical consequence would be outside playtime is delayed until she cleans up. Depending on the age, they may need some help, but don't underestimate your kids' abilities. If they made the mess, they're probably more than able to clean up at least some or most of it. Second example, your child throws a toy in the house after being clearly told that throwing items is disrespectful and unsafe. So losing the privilege of playing with that toy for a reasonable amount of time. If it's a little kid, that could be 30 minutes, okay? If it's an older child, it might be a few days, okay? Let's say your child intentionally hurts or knocks down another child. In this case, we have to facilitate a little bit, stay in the other child's presence, okay, until they can somehow work out the problem and repair the relationship. Younger kids may need some help finding the words, but whenever possible, we want to avoid just telling them exactly what to do. Part of it is like the problem solving and the learning process, but the focus here should really be on making it right instead of just saying sorry. Let's say your child speaks disrespectfully to you. Ignoring the comment or the request until they can find a respectful way to say it. So, a quick, I'll respond to your request when you speak kindly to me. Say it one time. This works really well for teens. I'll answer you after you lower your voice. Okay. Couple more examples. Let's say your children are unwilling to share an item. You remove the item from both children and encourage them to work together to find a solution. Okay. And this is good too, because the bonus here is they can work toward a common goal. Let's say your child refuses to put items away or continually forgets to do so. If you are the one picking up the items after they've been given a reasonable amount of time, you remove them. And again, for a developmentally appropriate amount of time. But your child will also then need you picked up for them, even though it was their responsibility. So then before they get it back, not only do they have it removed for a while, have them do something to help you out. Since you had to do their chore, they should do one of yours. Okay. The final one, let's say you have a teenager who uses something of yours and loses or breaks it, kind of like the earpods example. You work with them to come up on a plan about how they're going to replace the object or fix it. If it was taken without your permission, it should be extra challenging to do, because that's kind of a double whammy there, not just the not being responsible with the item, but taking it without asking. There's kind of two layers there. They need to have to work hard to fix the mistake so they understand the value and the gravity of what they've done. Okay, so just to wrap up, another one of my favorite quotes about discipline: discipline is helping a child solve a problem. Punishment is making a child suffer for having a problem. To raise problem solvers, we want to focus on solutions, not retribution. And that's L.R. Nost. So just a quick summary: positive discipline focuses on teaching, teaching, teaching. It does not shame or punish. When we punish, the child just gets mad at us, and then they blame us and focus on being mad at us instead of actually learning from their choices. Consequences result from the choices that children make. So essentially, they choose the consequence they experience, which over time will help them learn responsibility and self-control. We want them to stop and actually think it all the way through and then choose accordingly. And again, the choices is another great way to avoid power struggles. Remember that natural consequences are the inevitable result of a behavior. Sometimes we just have to let things play out. However, natural consequences are not appropriate if the behavior is unsafe. We're not going to put our child at risk, obviously. To kind of goes without saying. I feel a little silly even saying it. We're not going to put a kid at risk just to make a point. Logical consequences are something that are imposed by a parent or caregiver. But in order to make them really clearly different from a punishment, we need to make sure that we're acknowledging mutual rights. We need to have it relate to the misbehavior. We present it in a way that's non-judgmental, firm but kind, and we make really clear the two choices. So, like I said, the distinguishing between logical consequences and punishment, again, I have to reiterate: calm but firm tone of voice, a patient and teaching attitude, and a willingness to accept the child's decisions. Okay. Again, I don't want to, I can't emphasize enough that it doesn't just mean let kids walk all over you or get away with everything or never have a consequence, but there's a way to do it in a way that teaches as opposed to just teaching them to behave when we're watching them. Okay. Try to think ahead. By thinking ahead of those common problematic situations, um, when we're prepared for it or we have ideas already ready to go, it makes it a lot easier to respond in the moment in a way that we like and we think is helpful, as opposed to just reacting, which isn't always the best way. Um, Always follow through as hard as it is. We can't step in and save them. Once we've laid out the choices and they've made their choice, they have to be allowed to experience the results of the choice that they made. And it goes probably without saying, but this approach is not a quick fix. Man, I wish it was. I wish we could do it once and they would learn. But it doesn't work like that. Children, it's a process, and children and teens will likely need to experience the consequences, good and bad, more than once before they learn from it. So it does take patience, but the results are worth it in the long run. So before we wrap up, just a reminder about some of the other resources that are out there. If you're watching this already on YouTube, you know there are several videos on there. We now have some new ones that I'll be posting, which are called quicker tips, and those are shorter. Those will be between 5 and 7 minutes. And we do have several of these quick tip sessions like this that are about a half hour. The screen that I'm showing is a screenshot of our parent web page. If you haven't seen this, it's basically a web page to organize. It was a way for me to organize my resources in a way that parents could access them very easily. It does look like a lot. I can send you the link if you don't have it already. My email is there, jenbaker@benicia.unified.org. I have gotten feedback it can look a little overwhelming when you first log in because it's a lot, but the way that it's organized is I have things organized under columns. So there's different topic areas and you can kind of peruse the topic area. You can either go right to left to see the different topics or up and down to see the materials in one column. And there's videos and handouts and all kinds of good stuff there. And I do regularly go over it and update it. So if you want more information, feel free to peruse that. And then the final thing is I am continuing office hours. So you can see down at the bottom there. This is a free resource for parents. You basically fill out a form for a 30-minute consult with me if you want to talk about something you saw in one of the videos, if you have questions about resources, or if you just want to talk through some current issues related to online learning or really any kind of other problem behavior you're having during home routines right now. It may be something I can help with. So please reach out if you're interested in that. And I think that's about it for now. We do have 2 people here live. Are there any, I'm going to give a minute in case there's any questions or comments before we sign off. I'll give it just a moment. Nope, it looks like we're good. So that will be it for January's quick tips. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.